Oh, hi, I'm Chris, and this is the second set of questions I'm testing out just for fun. Uh, these are based more on a three-tier model associated with creativity and more on the affective or emotional states. Challenge. First question's about challenge. How did you identify your challenge? So this is similar to the problem finding question. The challenge was driven by a rub and frustration with PowerPoint. I'm sick of PowerPoint, I'm sick of words on slides, and I wanted to set myself a challenge for the most creative thing that I've done recently, which was a visual, purely visual or mostly visual talk on creativity for Red Bull. And my challenge was to have as few words as possible, be as visual as possible, and that's not my strength in many respects. So I identified my challenge by frustration. I was sick of boring talks and sick of boring visuals associated with talks, and I wanted to, I don't know, jumpstart my development to be more visual and more creative. Feelings. What feelings did I have associated with the process of generating this most recent creative product? Feelings depends on the stage. A lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, because I've never given a talk never given a talk outside of the academic context, and this was going to be to a bunch of famous people or people I didn't know or business people or Red Bull people. So that was crazy. My fellow speakers are all TED fellows. I'm not. So I knew that I was going to be sitting with some of the world's best thinkers, best communicators, and they've had all this training in how to give good talk, and I never have. So there was a lot of anxiety. No self-doubt. I know I can give a good lecture, but I was afraid that it wouldn't be good enough. And I was also afraid that without prompts or words that my language would fail me and I would slip into my usual potty mouth or kind of, I don't know, sloppy speech. And my partner, Amber Button, is really good at being more formal in her language, and I'm not so good. So when I give a talk and she's like, you said and like 3 times and right 4 times, you didn't need to add those things. It reminds me that it's good to try to formalize the language, even if you want to be informal and personal when you give a lecture. So my feelings were mostly fear and challenge. After it was done, I was happy. I didn't quite nail it, but I felt good, which is better than feeling bad. What was my source of inspiration? Great question, Metachris. My source of inspiration, I guess, was a run. I went for a run, and then that map that I used to organize my thoughts, I realized it was purely visual, so maybe I could do a purely visual talk. Other sources of inspiration, I've seen lots of Eric's talks, which are all like pretty movies instead of talks. It turns out he uses PowerPoint, but uses animations. So that inspired me to try and be as good as the other speakers that were going to be presenting with me. And the final question, what is my internal process? My internal process is a mix of kinetic and quantitative looking at numbers. So the kinetic part, if that's the correct term, is running. Runs always help me, not necessarily with problem finding, but with problem solving and with ideation, but never with evaluation. And my internal process, right up until the penultimate day before the presentation, I was busy looking at the Excel file with all the metadata in it, trying to understand what the numbers meant and how I could visualize that. And I saw this challenge as presenting the most boring data in the world, an Excel file of metadata in a purely visual format, and yet I was still back to the underlying quantitative structure of it the day before. So my internal process is always look for numbers, and when I write editorials, my favorite editorials are ones that have some form of evidence that is empirical in it to convince the reader that this is real and not made up. And so I wanted to have that in my talk. So the internal process is numeric, quantitative, physical, in that I always go for a run. Maybe emotional at some level. I try to identify why I care about this. And the answer to that, my internal process was I cared because I didn't want to disappoint Eric. I cared because I wanted to challenge myself to be as good as my colleagues. And I cared because I wanted to maintain my dignity. All right, that's it. Too many ums. Bye-bye.